many of you are familiar with RNP approaches, required navigation performance? Basically, you know, what Pete's talking about, and the airlines are just loving this, is putting airplanes on virtual steel rails in the sky. And you can design the slopes of these things so you can come in at very low power and basically roll out on final, configure, and boom. You're basically giving people VFR-like flexibility in traffic with these virtual steel rails in the sky that can do this in IFR conditions. There's a lot going on here. For instance, if that virtual steel rail goes directly over your house, you're going to go, not in my backyard. So there's a lot of environmental impact. Today, it's kind of like going from the frying pan into the fire. You're going to have to solve a lot of environmental issues before you can put these virtual steel rails in the sky. By the way, you don't have to have just one to each runway. You can have multiple ones that spread out the environmental impact. But there's a lot of things there. What are the other things besides, and by the way, that data set between controllers on the ground and the air is called CPDLC. Let's make it an acronym-rich environment. That's controller to pilot data link communication. It's something that's been on the drawing board for more than a decade. What are the other big issues?
Well, I think, you know, there's a lot of conversation around the term next gen, and I think generally speaking, there is a recognition within the broad community that as we move forward and we become more satellite-based as opposed to ground-based, we become more digital as opposed to analog, we'll have opportunities. We'll have opportunities to improve our efficiency and thus reduce delays. It'll expand capacity as we get to more precise spacing. We'll be able to reduce our environmental footprint because we'll have more direct operations. And we'll probably be able to improve safety because we'll have better situational awareness. But one of the challenges that I think we face is that next gen has almost become a catch-all phrase. It means all things to all people. And when we talk about what's the impact of next gen or how important is next gen, a lot of times we let the confusion get in the way of what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. What next gen is not, it's not a big bang. It's not a flip of the switch. It's not something that one day we turn off our air traffic control system and turn on the new next gen. It's an evolutionary process that in some ways is transformative because we are moving ground-based to satellite-based. We are moving from analog to digital. And in a lot of ways, we don't necessarily know what all the opportunities are going to be because of that. So when you say what's the impact of the current environment on next gen, I think in a lot of ways it depends on whether we're talking about policies that are part of next gen, procedures, RNP, RNAV, that are part of next gen, or technologies, ADSB, DATCOM, all of that. And I think that the important thing is that our community understands that we have not been sitting still in terms of evolving our air traffic control system. We have been moving forward, whether it's wide area augmentation system, whether it's reduced vertical separation minimum. We have been doing things to enhance the capacity, improve the safety and the efficiency of our air transportation system. We need to keep that going forward, and we need to not let the big kind of overwhelming idea of there's a next gen out there and it's going to cost billions. I think we need to be very clear, what is it we want to do this year, next year, and the year after? Why is it important, and how do we articulate that?
Last thing I want to add is just you know, something I consider next gen is I've been flying around the last couple months with my iPad, and I've been up to 14,000 feet in the most remote part of this country, and I'm still being able to track exactly where I am on a moving map display with an iPad right in front of me. I mean, this is going to revolutionize the way we fly. To be able to go, I've got all my Jepson charts on there. I've got a $5 app. I can tell weather before I even get in the cockpit. I know exactly what the weather looks like. And so for the part of general aviation that doesn't have very sophisticated flight management systems on board the aircraft, we're going to be able to have these portable devices that are available to everybody. And we should be able to pump in situational data on where other aircraft are on a portable device. We don't have to spend the big dollars to be able to put it in some of these light aircraft. And that's really what the future is all about. We're going to be able to provide products to Rod's and Andrew's membership that are just phenomenal. And if we can get some of those ground stations installed in the airports that Henry's responsible for out there, it's absolutely fantastic what we can do for a generation of pilots coming in that is very, very tech savvy, and they're just going to want more and more of this. So there's some neat things on the horizon that are starting to come into aviation that really make it exciting.
I think Andrew was talking about that this morning. He said one of the ways we get the little guys to buy into automatic dependent surveillance is to say, geez, there's nothing in it. If it's, with him, what's in it for me? If it's all ADS-B out, their big payback for the investment is ADS-B in, where they can see the traffic. And what Pete's talking about, what Andrew's talking about, once we make this available on portable devices and bring down the cost, allowing people to use, commercial off-the-shelf products, it's really going to stimulate the early buy-in, early equipage, and it'll help FAA in the whole effort. Before we get into the open questions, a couple other things that have come up, one of which is John Eagleton from North Star Aerospace was saying, hey, Fred, what's it going to take to turn the general aviation business around? What's it going to take to turn the economy around? Who knows what it's going to take? But one question I do want to ask the panelists right now, when do you guys see a turnaround in the light aircraft market going into light jet and perhaps medium jet? We know that the top end of the market's already turned around, but when does the bottom end of the market turn around?
Well, if you look at our predictions, in a normal economic recovery, we would have seen the piston end of the market, so the bottom end of the market start to recover first, and then the other aircraft up the spectrum of products follow. And if you looked at when economists had said the recovery started, which was about mid-year last year, we should have already seen that recovery on the piston market, and we have not seen that yet. A lot of factors we all know as we watch this economy and we watch kind of an anemic stair-step type of growth out there, we're not seeing the type of robust recovery that we've seen after previous recessions. The availability of credit has hit us significantly, and if you've got enough money to buy something at the high end of the spectrum, you probably got enough money that you don't have to finance a whole hell of a lot of it, or financing becomes very easy for you. As you get further and further down the spectrum of products, that becomes more difficult. And that's why export financing has played a much bigger role, and you see that as a debate on the commercial side, but we've also been actively working that on the business jet side of things, because right now getting terms from governments is probably more so important than it ever was previously for not only aircraft itself, but for engine sales and other things. So we've been working that aggressively. As we look at where the recovery should start for the remainder of the product spectrum, and it may work its way down from the top end toward the bottom end, which is something different, we're still looking at the recovery starting at the end of next year and on into 12. So it's much further delayed than what we originally anticipated in the normal economic model.
Yeah, I mean, is this really tied to unemployment and gross domestic product until the economy, gets healthy as a whole? General aviation's not going to get healthy?
Well, historically, corporate profits, corporate earnings have been a very strong indicator of the health of the general aviation industry. So in a lot of ways, there are things we can do in the margins to help in a down economy. I think we saw bonus depreciation was helpful coming out of the recession earlier in the decade. I think it was helpful helping the last quarter last year. And I'm pleased that before Congress went to its elections, it gave us an opportunity to use it again this year. But the reality is that in a much bigger picture, the health of general aviation is largely tied to the economy. The good news is, as Pete said, we are no longer in a recession. We've been growing for a little while now, but we're growing at a very slow rate. I think if you look at where we're going to be, the idea is that we probably will have maybe 2% growth next year, maybe even the year after. When general aviation gets really good is when we start to grow over 3%. So in a lot of ways, there are things that we can do to help general aviation today. We can try to have things like bonus depreciation. We can encourage there to be the availability of financing. We can stimulate demand and excitement about our industry. But to a certain extent, we need the economy to grow, and to grow robustly, over 3%. And that may take a little bit.
Questions from the audience? Doug? Just yell.
And what are the chances of FAA reauthorization passing this year? And since we know that's not going to happen, what are the ramifications of it going to a new Congress?
Well, before we give up completely, and I certainly think that most people understand your comment, we did have comments made post-election